One of the benefits of years is to see the kids turning into young adults and young adults slowly becoming more young adults, more adults. And tonight, our guest speaker, I've met her as a child who attended the cheder and was doing her bat mitzvah around the time that Kfir, my son, was doing the bar mitzvah, and the years have passed, and now they are young adults and they have a lot to say, like the Bob Marley songs. We got so much things to say right now, and this is the time for us to hear what they got to say, the young generation. And without further ado, I present you Lulu Potenza. Lulu, to you. Thanks for being with us. Thanks for taking this opportunity.
Rabbi, and Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Ever since my first year of life, my family has road tripped from Johannesburg to the Eastern Cape every year for a huge holiday in the Transkei. To get to this very remote oasis, you travel through the rolling hills of the Eastern Cape, and from a very young age, I've been exposed to the different ways in which people in this country live. I have lived a life of immense privilege and great joy and adventure, and for that I will always be grateful. However, the flip side of that privilege has also always been shown to me by my parents, and for that I thank them. Because I'm the daughter of white parents, I also knew that we came from different places ancestrally, because, well, obviously, right? And one of my moms works at the Apartheid Museum, and because of this, I was able to understand a little more about where my ancestors came from. And even then, I think truly only last year was my first time of feeling a sense of true madness and fury. I think that there is a huge difference when you are hearing or learning about something that happened in the past and when you are living the atrocities in real time. Now, don't get me wrong. So many unthinkably terrible things have happened in this country and all around the world before 2020, and many more things will happen after, and I understand that. But personally, my political awakening, as it were, happened last year. After the murder of George Floyd, a ripple effect seemed to happen all across the world, and I think it knocked many people speechless. I can't say that I was surprised, but I was furious. The fact that this was the world that we lived in was hard for me to grasp, especially because I was in a very transitional period of my life, going from high school to university. And during this time as well, the tragic deaths of Collins Khosa, Sibusiso Amos, and Beatrice Miggles also took place, all due to police brutality. And I think the sting of those deaths was also rippling throughout South Africa. And it was then that I started attending marches. Every Black Lives Matter march that me and my friends could attend, we did. And in fact, that just fueled my anger because there was barely anyone at the marches. It was basically the same group of people every week at every vigil, and to me this was shocking. Now granted, we were in the middle of lockdown, but looking at the whole world, and at that point it really was the whole entire world marching for Black Lives Matter, and then looking back at South Africa, it really didn't make sense to me, especially given our tragic past. It was at this point in my life, I think, that I thought about what took place on the 16th of June in 1976 the most. I think that this was for two reasons. The first was I felt the volume and power of coming together for a joint and important cause and giving your all to it. Secondly, I thought about it because some of these events would gather police attention. And that tiny bit of fear that ran through me was also what I thought about, because in reality, that fear and that threat was barely anything. Yes, we were in a pandemic, but masks were being used, precautions were being made, social distancing was applied. And so it really wasn't like anyone was going to get arrested or anything bad was going to happen. the students that marched in 76 could not share that same sentiment. And so my awe and admiration grew for those 20,000 plus students who just did exactly what they needed to do with power and strength and bravery. And in those moments, on those marches, I've never felt proud of being Black. I'm 19 years old, which, as I've heard, is the beginning of the rest of my life. High school for me overall was a very positive experience, infused with interesting discussions on politics, race, gender, sexuality, religion, and so much more. But I really do believe that now that I've left the schooling system, this is when I will grow the most. On that note, I would like to share a few anecdotes that I have either learnt and dreamed about, or ideas that I think are important for our country to move forward in, even if just in the smallest way. The first one is, Black people aren't poor because they are Black. The texture of our hair, the color of our skin, the dense culture and languages that Black people possess isn't what made Black people poor. Black people are poor because it was economically easy for a group of white men whose interests in empire building and wealth accumulation triumphed any notion of justice or commitment to the democratic value. Understanding, admitting, and saying that point is something that in my generation, I know has been a big topic of discussion in like my history classes and English classes, and should be a continuing conversation moving forward. Our planet is in disarray, and if we don't wake up, there will not be a functioning planet for our grandkids. This is a reality that is not going anywhere. And yes, it wasn't my generation's fault, but it is our problem now. So the notion of we weren't here, we didn't know, we don't have anything to do with it is completely false, especially in assuming that the natural order of life takes place and our grandparents and parents' generations die sooner. So if you have the means to do small things like recycling and being a little more conscious about the packaging you buy, and you aren't doing that, you are doing us all a great disservice. When I think about the term born free, I think about the fact that I can now do whatever I want to be. I am free to be me. A family like mine wasn't possible a mere 25 years ago. And so although progress is slow, it does happen. However, the fact that in 2021, people in the LGBTQIA+ community, in particular young people, are murdered, raped, abused, and disowned is something to me that is an abomination. And if these perpetrators happen to bring God into the equation, which actually happens more often than not, it just becomes clearer and clearer to me each day that I hear about these stories, that the two of us clearly have very different gods. Politics and policing are two main entities that are literally in place to serve, protect, and think about the greater good of people. And in this country, it's no secret that they have failed in the past and probably will continue to in the future, hopefully not as frequently or as on such a big scale. But it is our job as the youth to reconstruct these two powerhouses from the bottom up. Because the corruption, in my opinion, is way deeper than saying we are going to get rid of one person and everything else will be peachy. For me, that is an incorrect way of thinking about it, because the entity as a whole is rotten. And so we as the youth need to break that apart, pick it apart and start again. And, you know, this is obviously, it's a dream scenario. It's best case scenario. But I think that it is important to have a stronger youth voice in politics that can actually voice the opinions of the youth, and so that the youth can be more involved in such situations and scenarios, so that it's not just a clear divide of like, mostly in most cases of politics, it's older men, and there's a huge gap and divide in the age groups of the people in power in this country. And I just hope to live in a country one day where people don't feel like they are voting for the lesser of two evils. I hope to live in a South Africa where, as a woman, I feel safe to walk after the sun goes down. We are living in a terrifying phase of our country where it is clear that women are not looked after, valued, and loved. And knowing this and thinking about someday in the future when I have my own kids and possibly a daughter genuinely terrifies me. South African men and all men in general need to be held more accountable. And our generation, our people my age and people a little older who are getting ready to start having kids, will have kids in the next 10 years. It is our responsibility to raise the next generation of men to be better, to think better, because the actions of the generations past have really, really shown terrible, terrible atrocities. The fact that you can murder your 7-month pregnant girlfriend because she left you is a logic that makes absolutely no sense, but that happens frequently in South Africa. And lastly, I hope to live in a South Africa with a new and restored identity of Ubuntu. South Africans love laughing and having a good time. It is something that is entrenched in our society and has been for the longest time. But somewhere along the way, with colonialism, femicide, capitalism, and so many other things, we lost our way a little bit. I hope that we can find our way back to being one nation that is built on more happiness than pain. I have faith in the youth in general and in my generation because I don't see another way out, but also because I think we were raised in a way that was better than in the way that our parents were raised. Better time, better resources. And so just to close, I would like to say that to the marchers of June 16, to the 20,000 students who marched for me, really, for Black people in South Africa in the future to have a fair and better shot at an education that is fair and good. It is appreciated so much. To everyone who marched, like it really is incredible to look back on our struggle and to look back at the stories and to see what people had to go through for things that we may take for granted, for things that we may think are simple. For them, it wasn't simple. It was really hard. And I think that even myself, I need to remember that a little more and be a little more grateful for the simple things in our everyday lives that we take for granted. To the 1,000 souls who lost their lives in that march, may God bless and keep their souls forever. Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, everybody, and happy Youth Day.